There are other foods that actually cause you to have high histamine, and that are histamine triggering foods. Now, I didn't know that fermented foods caused to have a lot of histamine release. So I was indulging in a lot of fermented foods. And when I mean fermented, I mean kimchi, sauerkraut. I was eating those like every day, sometimes twice a day. And that's what caused me to have high histamine. Not realizing that that's what I was eating it because I'm thinking I'm getting myself probiotics. But because I overindulged in how much I was eating of it, I laugh about it because it's just like, what the heck did you do to yourself? I was giving myself high histamine. Welcome everyone to the Skin Deep podcast. I'm your host, Mekisha Banks. This podcast is really to help everyone go much deeper into solving some of the concerns that they have for their skin. So whether it's eczema, dermatitis, dry skin, sensitive skin, or just your overall skin health. And again, I am excited to go over something that's a very special topic to me today, and it's all about histamine. I gave myself histamine, and this was back in October, and I didn't realize, what I did to myself, especially because my skin exploded. I had a lot of eczema breakout, and I just was like, I'm confused. I have no idea what happened to my skin. So today I really want to be covering with you what is histamine, how did I solve my histamine issues, and what my skin felt like, and what does it do for people to have high histamine. In the industry, there's a lot of confusion about what eczema is and how it's triggered and so forth. And being the owner of Everbella, I never, want everyone to think that I only think that it is best to just have a product on your skin and that's how you solve your eczema issues, because it's never been that way for me. It's always understanding that whole entire issue of, what's going on mentally, what's going on physically, what's going on dietary, what's going on in your overall environment, what are you using on your skin? Because all of those things have a major impact on your skin. It is never going to be a one thing fixes all. So I never want people to think that I give this impression that because I own a skincare company that helps people with their skin concerns using proper products, that I ignore all of the other things that are important in your overall skin health. So let's get right into this topic. So for example, what is histamine, and what does histamine play a part in our overall skincare? Histamine, and I want to make sure I have this correct, because I know sometimes some people will be like, that's not theoretically correct. I want to make sure that I have that correct terminology here. But at the same time, I like to make things simple and easy to digest. No pun intended there. So histamine is a signaling molecule. So what does it really mean? When you have a histamine gets released into the body in terms of breaking things down. It helps to signal to the body, okay, there's a foreign agent, there is food that we need to break down, there's something that we need to break down in the body. And when that goes through that process of breaking things down in the body, sometimes we release or we get, allergic reactions. We might get inflammation, we might get a bit of bloating, we might get a bit of heat in the body. And it's strictly because it is seeing a foreign element in the body, and it's like, okay, let's break this down, because one, it might be something that might harm the body, or there's too much of something in the body and it wants to break it down and get it released out of the skin. So a lot of times that has to do with allergies. So for instance, you may have pet allergies, dander, dust, or environmental allergies such as pollen and so forth. And when you ingest too much of that in the body, these signaling agents, which is the histamine, goes in and it starts to break it down through a process of inflammation, breaks it down and gets it out of the skin through the excretory system. Now, the thing with that is when we have healthy amount of histamine, our body just breaks things down and doesn't think much of it. That hives that we get, the sneezing or the runny nose and so forth, it starts to, go away after some time. So that's an acute response in terms of your histamine or DOA enzymes. It basically just, gets rid of it on a timely manner. But this is when we have a bit of an issue, when it becomes a chronic issue of high histamine, or the reactions such as the hives, the runny nose, the irritation, the inflammation, the itching, the scratching. When we have a chronic, feeling of that, or a chronic experience of inflammation or high histamine, this is when we have a bit of an issue. So this is basically what's happened to me is over time, this is a great indicator that I didn't pay attention to. Over time, I always had a runny nose. For a good 20 years, I had a runny nose. I was always blowing my nose, and I made an excuse. I was just like, meh, no big deal. It's the environment, it's dusty and so forth. And it's, when you kind of look at that, it was like a slow, steady kind of drip that, my doctors decided that, hey, take this nasal spray, go ahead and take Benadryl all the time. And I, didn't think too much of it. I was just like, okay, let me just take these. But eventually I realized I was almost reliant on them. And my one nose has been clogged for majority of my life. So I have never experienced really for a long period of time breathing through both of my nostrils. And it's because the papules behind in my nose are very inflamed. They're large. So, even going through a surgery to get rid of it, to collapse them down, the issue was gone for about a month or so. I could breathe, relatively healthy. And then it basically closed back up again. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm back to this one nasal kind of breathing state. And, after a few years of dealing with this, I just didn't understand it. I didn't understand why my nose was like this. They told me just to drain it out, have these nasal drips like the nettle pod and doing that. And I was doing that regularly, and I'm going to be redoing that again. And it helped my nose actually release a lot of that inflammation and so forth. But it was recently, back in October 2024, where I went through a very serious episode of just like eczema blown out of the water. And in a previous episode, I talked about this with a guest speaker named Mahak, and love her to pieces. We really uncovered a mental connection that made my skin blow up. But also I realized I was eating certain things that also made my skin blow up and gave myself histamine. So what I realized in terms of the food compared to the mental state, we'll go through both of them so that you understand. There are certain foods that we can eat that cause us to have high histamine. One thing that we need to remember that's going to cause high histamine is processed foods. Like, it's right across the board. We know if you eat processed foods, your body is going to go into a state of having high histamine because it's foreign food. There's so much elements that are in these packaged foods, these processed foods, that our body does not understand or even know what the heck is in there. So it's too busy trying to fight off all of these different components of the fried chicken or the nuggets or the burgers, or like all of those things. We already know what processed food looks like. And our body's like, I don't know what this is, so I'm going to have to take out more guys to come and break down this food and see if we can kind of get it out of the body. And because you start to eat that too much, you get to cause yourself to have high histamine. So that is one of the foods that cause a lot of high histamine, is processed foods. Now, there are other foods that actually cause you to have high histamine, and that are histamine triggering foods. Now, I didn't know that fermented foods caused to have a lot of histamine release. So I was indulging in a lot of fermented foods. And when I mean fermented, I mean kimchi, sauerkraut. I was eating those like every day, sometimes twice a day. And that's what caused me to have high histamine. Not realizing that that's what I was eating it because I'm thinking I'm getting myself probiotics. But because I overindulged in how much I was eating of it, I laugh about it because it's just like, what the heck did you do to yourself? I was giving myself high histamine. So I would be very mindful of certain fermented foods that cause you to have high histamine. So those were the number one things that I was consuming on a regular basis. Now, there are a list of other foods that you can have or eat that also cause you to have high histamine. And those would be like tomatoes, it would be bananas, avocados. There's different things like dates. These are little things that cause high histamine. And you can, again, I'll put them in the show notes, a link below, that you'll get to go over different foods that cause you to have high histamine. People even see eggs that, or say that eggs also cause high histamine, but I eat eggs still now and they don't cause me to have high histamine. There is even the unfortunate part is when you're buying your meats, when you're buying your foods, if those cut meats have been sitting out into the chilled or in the fridge for too long, they start to collect and start to release histamine. So when you're grocery shopping, you should technically buy things that are frozen because they don't have the chance of releasing histamine, or even sealed, like plastic sealed. They also don't release histamine as much as if they are just freely open in a grouped together in a package versus individually wrapped. So those were the other things. So I'd make food and, I'm like this person that's like, oh, I want to go ahead and meal prep for like 3 days and I'll meal prep some of my food. But the problem is when you have that food that's cooked and it's been sitting there for too long, it will also release histamine. So I realized that I was doing things that, yes, I thought was better for me, but because they were high in histamine releasers, I was giving myself histamine, and very bad histamine. It was to the point that my whole, like I said, and I'm going to show these pictures, sometimes I'm like, look at them and I'm like really scared because I was like, how the heck did I do that so far? I was really, like, my skin blew up from my arms, my legs, my neck. My skin was very much red and inflamed, but it was also irritated, itchy. I would get hives after I'd eat a meal. I was in pain. I was in constant pain for about 2 months until I really figured out what the histamine issue was and I started fixing it step by step. Now, that's one way of triggering histamine. The other way of triggering histamine is through your mental, like your overall psyche. So my overall brain to gut connection was also triggering histamine because I had this feeling of fight or flight, like people are attacking me. I don't like what's going on. And in that episode, I went through it very deeply with Mehek because she really made some good connections there for me that I took in, but I didn't take in for too much, was high stress levels. When you have a lot of high stress, you're turning on the response of fight or flight. And that high response makes your body feel unsafe. And when it feels unsafe, your body wants to, again, fight, get rid of, shield, protect. So my body was in a high inflammation state. And because it was in this high inflammation state, my body just was on fire. Like I just want to itch everything and scratch here and there. So not only did I trigger histamine releasing through my mental state, I triggered it through the food that I was eating. So that's why I'm always telling people, I don't believe that just products are the only thing that are going to fix your eczema. There's all other components. If you're using great products, but yet you have a mental issues with different things, you have high anxiety, it's going to trigger eczema. If you are great mentally, great products, but you're eating garbage food every single day, it's going to trigger your eczema. So that's why I don't ever feel like people need to think that one thing fixes it. It's a trifecta. There's always a different component that you need to focus on. So because I had that high histamine, I had to really do some research in terms of how do I bring my levels back down to normal? How do I regulate my histamine? How do I bring it back down? Because when I started seeing different pockets of plaque on my body, that also is sometimes when you have too much candida in the body. And when there's too much candida, you'll start to get this overgrowth of skin. You start to get plaquing around the skin where it's just a lot of buildup of tissue. And when you have a lot of that, it's because, again, there's too much yeast overgrowth within the body, and now you have to bring that down as well. So when I noticed I had a little bit of candida, but it was mainly more just histamine because I was just feeling hot and irritated most of the time, and I felt these hot flashes. I felt like I was going through menopause, and I was like, am I really going through menopause? But I still had a menstrual cycle, so I'm like, I don't think that's the issue. So it has to be something else. So what I started doing that research, and I started looking at histamine releasers and how do you combat histamine. There's different ways that you can approach it. So let's go through those different ways of how to combat it when you realize you have histamine. So the way that I started looking at having histamine is one, again, if you have IBS or if you have SIBO, those are things, again, that your internal tract, your gut tract is obviously broken down to the point where it's not breaking down the food really well. So you're missing microbiome, or you just have a very, I would say, an unbalanced gut, and you need to repair the gut lining. So I looked at different things of repairing the gut lining. That's why I was taking fermented foods, because I was trying to repair my gut lining. But the problem is I was overindulging in my fermented food, and that's what started making it worse. Oh my gosh, it sounds so crazy now when I think back on it. So instead now it was like, okay, how do we repair everything and lower my histamine? So what I looked at is two major different ways of fixing the histamine. The first way was through supplementation, and then the second way was through my diet. If you look at it, the third way is to take antihistamines. And when you're taking antihistamines, it's very short-lived. I can sit there and drink Benadryl from Hitch all day long. I can drink that all day and it's not fixing the issue. It's strictly just, calming the histamine releasers, calming the inflammation, right? But it's just masking it. Again, this goes back to that same idea. You're just masking the issue versus counteracting the issue at the root cause. So people can take Claritin, Reactin, any of those antihistamine medications that you can take over the counter, but that's just calming down the inflammation. And I did still take them just because there's some nights it was very unbearable, but it's not the root cause to fix it. That's the problem with a lot of people, is that they have hives, they're getting breakups, they're getting the itching, the sneezing, the nose, whatever. And when you're taking these antihistamine or these hydrochloric acids, they are really just masking the issue. They're not eradicating it. And we need to eradicate the issue at its root. So that's why I looked at the two main options, which is supplementation, and then the other option, which is my nutrition. So I was like, what's the easiest thing I can do right now that can help me fast track and repair myself? And then I can go with something else where I need to do more research. First one was nutrition. Nutrition is always, always, always going to be the fastest and the quickest response to things, but at the same time, it's the foundation. So sometimes it may not be too quick, but it's still the foundation. It's still the core of being able to get on the right track. Because I can put supplements in my body all day, but if I'm eating garbage, it doesn't matter. It's counteractive. It's counterproductive. So that's why I went through nutrition first. So when I went through the nutrition, I told myself, this is what we're going to do for Mekisha for the next literally 2 months or 1 month until you see progress. I'm going to eat the exact same food every day, or 2 different meals, alternating them every single day until I feel my body decrease in its histamine releasers. So what do I mean by that? I had a breakfast, or it's really more like a lunch and a dinner, because I don't eat 3 times a day. Again, going back to that episode of fasting, you'll know what I mean by that. But I don't eat 3 times a day. I usually eat 1 or 2 meals maximum a day, maybe a snack, but mainly 2 meals a day. So my morning lunch meal and then my dinner meal. And I'm going to have 2 different types that I'm going to alternate with. And I'm going to eat that for the next 3 weeks to 3 to 4 weeks until I can see how my body takes it. It was extreme. I don't know. I know some people can't commit to that, but this was a case where when you see these pictures posted, you'll see that I had no choice. I literally had no choice. I needed to make a massive change because my body was screaming at me saying, you need to make this change now, or you need to go to the hospital, because it was very, very crazy how my skin exploded. So, for instance, my breakfast was Brussels sprouts, eggs, and what else was it? Brussels sprouts, eggs, and sometimes broccoli. And then my follow-up to that breakfast would be pomegranates and blueberries. That was my sweet treat, or my fruits that I would be allowing myself, because I couldn't have raspberries, I couldn't have strawberries, I couldn't even have oranges because they all release histamine. So I had to stick with low histamine. So blueberries with pomegranates, and my eggs and my Brussels sprouts were basically my breakfast every day. My tea would either be, it was more so stinging nettle tea or ashwagandha tea, because again, and I added a little bit of honey to it just so it had a bit of a sweet taste, because I naturally have a sweet tooth. I like my sweets. So I needed a little bit of sweet to curb the craving. I didn't really drink too much coffee because, again, depending on which coffee I was getting it from, again, if it's old coffee, there's a lot of mildew, there's a lot of different things in the coffee that would also cause me to have a histamine breakout or a reaction. And that's because old coffee, if there's mildew in those coffee, if you do your research on that, you'll know quality of coffee makes a difference. I would get a breakout of hives, so I couldn't drink that, and I couldn't just get it from anywhere. After that, that was basically my breakfast, and then my dinner was pretty much, it fluctuated between two different types of meals. One would be either steak, I would have white rice, and then I would have, again, broccoli or cauliflower or salad. Other days I would have codfish, haddock, or salmon, and same thing, I would have it with Brussels sprouts, broccoli, white rice, or salad. Like, my sides were pretty much the same thing. So that was my one meal. So again, and sorry, if I didn't have Brussels sprouts in the morning with my eggs, I would have bok choy. So those were basically the two different types of breakfast, or my two different types of dinners. That's what I did on a daily basis. I didn't change it. People thought I was crazy. My family was like, are you like sick? And I was like, nope, don't worry about it. I have to have the same consistent meal every single day. And I started feeling better because I didn't have like a breakout after I ate my dinner or ate anything. I didn't have a breakout, but I did sometimes have a little bit of Benadryl or, a reactant after I had a meal, because it would help kind of slow down my body from releasing histamine to break down the food. So that's one thing people need to understand, is when you're done eating your food, sometimes your body will release it in order for it to break down your food. But because I already had a presence of it, I didn't want my body to release more of it. So that's why I would have a Benadryl after my food. So then that way it would calm down the releasing of histamine while my food is being broken down. So that's my meals every single day for a month. I didn't change it. I didn't care. I alternated it. I stayed away from poultry, chicken or chicken, what's the other one? Like lamb and everything like that. I didn't really eat that, or turkey. I didn't really eat that. I just stuck to red meat because I wanted the minerals, and then I stuck to fish because I wanted the omega-3 fats. So that's what I stuck to. So after I pretty much maintained that, I decided to then go into supplementation. So I really did a lot of research on my supplements, so then that way I knew which is the right one to have with what meal, or just to break down and repair my gut and to repair it. I will be going more into supplementation after in another episode, but just so that you have an idea of what supplements I took, I always had my vitamin D. I usually made sure I had 6,000 IUs per day. Not 1,000 that some, people recommend. I had 1,000. Usually on average, they say 6,000 to 10,000 per day is good, because vitamin D is very vital in your daily organism processes, right? So I had vitamin D and K2. So that was my one supplement that's kind of combined together. And then I had vitamin C. So vitamin C is actually one of the best ones to help with antioxidants and fighting, the histamine. So vitamin C, I would take about 6 tablets per day, and each tablet had 500 IUs in it. So on average, it was quite high. And you'll know when you are overindulging on your vitamin C, meaning you're having too much, because you'll get the runs. Yes, you will want to go to the bathroom number 2 because your body, like, you'll have diarrhea because your body's like, ooh, that's way too much. So that's when I knew my borderline was about 6 tablets per day. If I went above and beyond that, it was a no-no. So I'd take 3 in the morning, and then I'd take 3 midday. And then when it came to the vitamin D and K2, it's 6 tablets, or 6 of those pills. So I'd take 3 in the morning, and I'd take 3 midday or right after my dinner. Now, in regards to helping breaking down histamine to basically backtrack it back to its normalcy, it's called cortisone. So cortisone is like a DOA. I always mix up these 3 letters. It's like an enzyme that helps to regulate histamine and regulate your antibodies, right? So I would take cortisone. They say you could take a maximum of about 1,500 IUs per day, or mgs per day. I have to get the bottles in front of me. I literally took 3 of them per day. So I'd take one in the morning with my vitamin C. I'd take one after my meal, and then I would take one after my dinner. So I took 3 of them per day, and I kid you not, that helped really calm down the heat in my body. Because I was feeling heat, especially in my wrists. I was feeling heat on my forearms. I was feeling heat behind my knees. I was feeling heat on my neck. And every time I would take that, it would calm down the heat. So I would do that 3 times per day. Now, the other things that I took that helped in terms of my skin repair, because I find we're not getting enough of them, especially when we're eating fish, we're not getting enough of it. And a lot of the foods that we're eating don't have high amounts of omega-3. So that's the reason why I started taking omega-3 fats. But I wasn't taking just your original omega-3s and that's it. I was taking cod liver oil. Cod liver oil has a higher impact of omega-3 fats and also sub-nutrients in it that are better than just taking omega-3s. So I was taking 2 tablets or 2 capsules of the cod liver oil, and each one of them was about 250 milligrams, if I'm not mistaken. Again, I'm going to be going through this a little bit more in detail and, posting pictures on our social media so people know exactly which ones I take. So I was taking those also about twice a day. So I'd take 1 in the morning after my breakfast and 1 in the evening after my dinner, so that it just kind of boosts that absorption of that fatty oil. So there's those. Last but not least, actually no, I have 2 more supplements that I was taking. The next one that I was taking was trace minerals. So trace minerals is very fundamental to our growth and health of our body. If you're not familiar with other smaller trace minerals that our body needs to absorb, it's simple things like copper, zinc, magnesium, there's other small little ones that in there that I can go through, sodium, they are also really, really fundamental in our body's day-to-day, absorptions of things. And, you can get some of these trace minerals from seeds and nuts, fiber from certain fruits or, certain grains. But I find it's not the same when you're, again, going through a high histamine state. Your body's not really absorbing everything the right way. So I started taking trace minerals before I had histamine, but I kept maintaining it throughout. So those are really important, is your trace minerals. The last but not least, actually, that I was taking as well is iron. So again, usually they say you can get your iron from spinach and kale. Guess what? Spinach also has high histamine, so I couldn't take spinach. You can get it from kale, but again, I needed iron from actual supplement versus it from foods, because your body doesn't really absorb iron from leafy greens. You really get a lot of your iron from meats, such as, red meat. So I decided that I start to get more of my iron through supplementation because yes, I'll eat the meat, I'll have that, but I needed that extra boost because again, when you are a person of color, it's a little bit harder for you to absorb iron. You tend to be more anemic than anything, and because of that, I needed to get it from a supplementation. And I almost forgot I do have one more supplement that I've started taking, and it was magnesium. There is magnesium in the trace minerals, but it's not a high amount. And again, magnesium is in every single processes that your body goes through in terms of rebuilding its cells and rebuilding its core and also synthesizing other processes throughout the body, and that's magnesium. You can't even absorb vitamin D and K2 properly if you don't have magnesium. So that's the reason why I started taking magnesium as well. It helps with me sleeping at night and allowing me to have better sleep so that I can recover my skin better overnight. So I would take magnesium twice a day, one in the morning and one at night, usually about an hour before bed. I would take the magnesium so then that way I could sleep better. I know this sounds like a whole lot of pill action. I know it sounds like, okay, is she having more pills than she's having food? Yeah, I am, but it's because the supplements are helping me regain the balance that I need in my body. And that's the reason why I started taking the supplements a little bit more. Again, there's so much research out there that talks about supplements, and we know that not every supplement is made equally. Not every brand is great. So you really just definitely want to do your research so that you're not having a whole bunch of narcotics, because a lot of these brands don't put in the right elements or the right ingredients in the supplements, and how they are processed also makes a difference as well. So again, I will be having a follow-up podcast on supplements coming up, but this is what I basically did to help myself with fixing my histamine intolerance that I gave myself. So again, histamine is not bad, it's good, but when you have too much histamine in your blood or in your body, this is where that heat that you're feeling in the neck and the legs and the arms and so forth. People thought I was going through a Kundalini activation. I also still think I was going through a Kundalini activation, but I also know what I did to my skin. And I also knew what my mental state did to my skin. So this is basically what I did. I had the exact same meal for 30 days and my skin is amazing now. Like, what? I'm so happy. So happy. Like, I had serious, issues. They're still coming back to its original color and texture. It's feeling softer than it was before, but across October, November, December, and now it's beginning first week of January. It took 3 months for my skin to go back to normal, but they do say usually on a course of every 90 days, your skin really transforms. If you really try to transform your body, it's usually 90 days it takes it to do that from a cellular level. And that's what I did. I literally went through fixing my skin from the cell's basic components to now seeing it reflect on my skin in a much more healthier way. It's crazy to see what my skin went through, but this is why people that have these types of issues with their eczema and dermatitis, not to take it lightly, but to also do your own research. Don't rely on taking medication for it, injecting and so forth. You need to really look at it from a cellular level. How can you help your skin? And from a mental state, how can you help your skin? And this is what I did to fix my skin. The same meal for 2-3 months. I'm still eating the same meal. I started adding in a few things back into my diet. The supplements, still consistent with it. I don't take the Benadryl anymore. I actually stopped taking that about 3 weeks ago. And then I don't have the extreme heat. My skin looks much better around my body. And I still have the nose drip. I'm focusing on that next. But I also just got over a cold a couple of days ago. But this is what, you have to do. You have to dig deep and you have to stick to it. You got to maintain it for a couple of weeks to a couple of months to see that benefit. It's not going to change overnight. It's not going to change in a week. You need to stick to that commitment of eating the right foods, taking the right supplements, getting the rest, working out a little bit, getting that heat and cold exposure, and you'll start to see that your skin will start to change in the right way. So I will follow up to this this podcast again so that people get a little bit more information about what I did. I'll answer some questions as well. Let me know in the chat or into the comments or send us an email. Have you ever experienced histamine? Do you feel like you're experiencing histamine right now? What are you doing for it? How are you fixing it? Or what can I help you with? Right? And again, as always, my name is Mekisha, your host of the Skin Deep podcast, where we're here to help you on your skincare journey. Please download our 10 hacks to getting better skin. And it does have a lot to do with what I spoke about today. It's in the description below. So definitely give us a shout out if you have any questions, and follow us on our social media so you can see what I'm doing on a daily basis to help my skin. All right. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for tuning in to the Skin Deep podcast. Don't forget to download your free guide to our 10 hacks to great skin. Just check the link in our bio. I look forward to seeing you in our next episode. Have an amazing day, everyone, and enjoy your self-care Sunday.